Section 2. Art and Culture in Heian. Section 2. Art and Culture in Heian. Building background. In 794, the Emperor and Empress of Japan moved to Heian, a city now called Kyoto. Many nobles, like the one you just read about, followed their rulers to the new city. These nobles loved art and beauty, and they tried to make their new home a beautiful place. Japanese nobles create great art. The nobles who followed Japan's emperor to Heian wanted to win his favor by living close to him. In Heian, these nobles created an imperial court, a group of nobles who live near and serve or advise a ruler. Members of the noble court had little to do with the common people of Heian. They lived apart from poorer citizens and seldom left the city. These nobles enjoyed their lives of ease and privilege. In fact, their lives were so easy and so removed from the rest of Japan that many nobles called themselves dwellers among the clouds. The nobles of this court loved beauty and elegance. Because of this love, many nobles were great supporters of the arts. As a result, the court at Heian became a great center of culture and learning. In fact, the period between 794 and 1185 was a golden age of the arts in Japan. Fashion. The nobles' love of beauty began with their own appearances. They had magnificent wardrobes full of silk robes and gold jewelry. Nobles loved elaborate outfits. For example, women wore long gowns made of 12 layers of colored silk, cleverly cut and folded to show off many layers at once. To complete their outfits, nobles often carried delicate decorative fans. These fans were painted with flowers, trees, and birds. Many nobles also attached flowers and long silk cords to their fans. Literature. In addition to how they looked, Japanese nobles took great care with how they spoke and wrote. Writing was very popular among the nobles, especially among the women. Many women wrote diaries and journals about their lives at court. In their diaries, these women carefully chose their words to make their writing beautiful. Unlike men, who usually wrote in Chinese, noble women wrote in the Japanese language. As a result, many of the greatest works of early Japanese literature were written by women. One of the greatest writers in early Japanese history was Lady Murasaki Shikibu. Around 1000, she wrote The Tale of Genji. Many historians consider this book to be the world's first full-length novel. Many readers also consider it one of the best. The Tale of Genji is the story of a prince named Genji and his long quest for love. During his search, he meets women from many different social classes. Many people consider The Tale of Genji one of Japan's greatest novels. The characters it describes are very colorful and seem real. In addition, Lady Murasaki's writing is clear and simple, but graceful at the same time. She describes court life in Japan with great detail. Most early Japanese prose was written by women, but both men and women wrote poetry. Nobles loved to read and write poems. Some nobles held parties at which they took turns writing poetry and reading their poems aloud to each other. Poems from this time usually had only 5 lines. They followed a specific structure that outlined how many syllables each line could include. Most were about love or nature, but some described everyday events. Here is an example of a nature poem about the end of winter. The breezes of spring are blowing the ripples astray along the water. Today they will surely melt the sheet of ice on the pond. Kino Tomonori from the Gosenshu. Visual art. Besides literature, Japan's nobles also loved the visual arts. The most popular art forms of the period were paintings, calligraphy, and architecture. In their paintings, the nobles of Heian liked bright, bold colors. They also liked paintings that illustrated stories. In fact, many of the greatest paintings from this period illustrate scenes from literature. such as the tale of Genji. Other paintings show scenes from nature or from court life. Many artists painted on doors and furniture rather than on paper. Another popular form of art in Heian was calligraphy, or decorative writing. Calligraphers spent hours carefully copying poems. They wanted the poems to look as beautiful as they sounded.
The arts in Heian. Heian was Japan's capital for many centuries. The wealthy nobles who lived there were great supporters of the arts. With their support, literature, painting, calligraphy, and other arts flourished in Heian. A favorite theme in Japanese painting was the tale of Genji. In this illustration of a scene from the novel, Genji's son is reading a letter as his wife approaches.
Architecture. The nobles of Heian worked to make their city beautiful. They greatly admired Chinese architecture and modeled Heian after the Chinese capital, Chang'an. They copied Chinese building styles, especially in the many temples they built. These styles featured buildings with wooden frames that curved slightly upward at the ends. The wooden frames were often left unpainted to look more natural. Thatched roofs also added to the natural feel. For other buildings, the nobles liked simple, airy designs. Most buildings were made of wood with tiled roofs and large open spaces inside. To add to the beauty of these buildings, the nobles surrounded them with elegant gardens and ponds. Similar gardens are still popular in Japan. Performing arts. The performing arts were also popular in Japan during the Heian period. The roots of later Japanese drama can be traced back to this time. People often gathered to watch performances by musicians, jugglers, and acrobats. These performances were wild and fun. Especially popular were the plays in which actors skillfully mimicked other people. In later centuries, these types of performances developed into a more serious form of drama called no. Created in the 1300s, no plays combine music, speaking, and dance. These plays often tell about great heroes or figures from Japan's past.
What forms of art were popular in the Heian period? The Buddha was a popular subject for statues in the Heian period. Japanese writing could be an art form in itself. This album, made in the shape of a fan, is covered in text and pictures.
Buddhism changes. Religion became something of an art form in Heian. The nobles' religion reflected their love of elaborate rituals. Most of the common people in Japan, though equally religious, didn't have the time or money for these ceremonies. As a result, different forms of Buddhism developed in Japan. One new form of Buddhism was very popular with Japan's common people. It was called Pure Land Buddhism and didn't require any special rituals. Instead, Pure Land Buddhists chanted the Buddha's name over and over to achieve salvation. In the 1100s, another popular new form of Buddhism called Zen arrived from China. Zen Buddhists believed that neither faith nor good behavior led to wisdom. Instead, people seeking wisdom should practice self-discipline and meditation or quiet thinking. These ideas appealed to many Japanese, especially warriors. As these warriors gained more influence in Japan, so did Zen Buddhism.
Many Zen gardens like this one include raked gravel, shaped to look like water, and small boulders arranged like mountains. Reading check. Finding main ideas. How did Buddhism change in Japan?
Summary and preview. At Heian, Japan's emperors presided over an elegant court. In the next section, you'll learn what happened when emperors and the court lost power and prestige.